I am Joshua, 34 years old, and my brother smashed my son's dinner plate on the floor because he thought I was nothing but a beggar in our own family home. Before I tell you about the moment I handed him an eviction notice that had been sitting in my pocket the whole time, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I want to know who is standing in my corner today. It started on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were supposed to be quiet. That was the rhythm I had built for myself, my 7-year-old son Leo, and my grandfather Arthur. We had a routine. At 5 p.m., I would help Grandpa Arthur from his reading chair to his wheelchair. We would go to the kitchen. Leo would set the table, carefully with 2 hands, tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in concentration, and I would cook. That Tuesday I was making pot roast. It was Grandpa's favorite. The smell of thyme and slow-cooked beef filled the high ceilings of the old estate kitchen. It was one of the few rooms in the mansion that felt warm. The rest of the house was grand, sure, but it was cold. It carried the weight of generations of old money and of dust that seemed to settle no matter how much I cleaned. I was stirring the gravy when I heard the tires. Not just tires. The aggressive crunch of gravel being crushed under the weight of an expensive SUV braking too hard. I froze. I looked at Grandpa. He was sitting at the head of the small kitchen table, a napkin tucked into his collar. His hands were trembling slightly. Parkinson's had been cruel to him this year, but his eyes were sharp. They darted to the window. "Is that him?" Grandpa asked. His voice was raspy. "I think so," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady for Leo's sake. Leo was already shrinking into his chair. He knew what that sound meant. The front door didn't open. It was thrown open. The heavy oak slammed against the stopper so hard the vibration traveled through the floorboards into the kitchen. "Hello? Anyone alive in this mausoleum?" Lucas, my older brother, the golden child, the man who wore 3-piece suits to casual lunches and leased cars he couldn't afford just to project an image of success. And right behind him, the clicking of high heels on marble, Karen, his wife. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and stepped out of the kitchen to meet them in the hallway. I didn't want them coming in deeper. I wanted to serve as a buffer. "Lucas," I said, "we weren't expecting you. Grandpa is about to eat." Lucas stopped. He looked me up and down. I was wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans with a stain on the knee from where I'd been gardening earlier. He smirked, that tight, superior smile that never reached his eyes. "We don't need an invitation to visit our own inheritance, Joshua," Lucas said, brushing past me. He smelled of expensive scotch and too much cologne. "And Karen wanted to see the crown molding in the dining room again. She's thinking of painting it gold when we take over management." "Beige," Karen corrected, not even looking at me. She was busy typing on her phone. "Gold is tacky. Beige is timeless." "We're eating in the kitchen," I said, blocking their path to the formal dining room. "It's warmer." Lucas laughed, a short, barking sound. "Of course you are. Like the help." He pushed past me. He didn't use his hands. He used his shoulder, checking me like a hockey player, making sure I felt his physical presence. He walked straight into the kitchen. Grandpa Arthur didn't look up. He was staring at his empty plate. Leo was gripping his fork so hard his knuckles were white. "Grandpa!" Lucas boomed, his voice too loud for the small room. "You're looking frail." "I'm eating, Lucas," Grandpa mumbled. Right. "Listen, we need to talk business," Lucas said, pulling out a chair and sitting down backwards on it, straddling it like he was some cool youth pastor instead of a 38-year-old businessman in debt. "Karen and I have been looking at the numbers. The upkeep on this place. It's draining the estate. We're thinking it's time to make some hard choices." "We?" I asked, stepping back into the room. "Grandpa is the owner. There is no we." Lucas spun around. The smile dropped. "Quiet, Joshua. The adults are talking. You're just here because you couldn't keep a job or a wife. Don't think for a second that changing diapers gives you a vote." The air left the room. I felt the heat rise in my neck. It was the low blow he always used. My divorce. My layoff. The fact that I had lost everything 6 months ago and had to move back here. He framed it as failure. He never mentioned that I was the only one willing to take care of Grandpa when the nurses quit. I'm feeding him, I said, my voice tight. Can this wait? No, it can't, Karen said from the doorway. She was looking at Leo with pure disdain. And why is the kid eating off the good china? Those are the Wedgwood plates. They're antiques. Leo looked down at his plate. It was just a plate to him. He's family, Karen, I said. He eats on plates. He's a liability, Lucas muttered. He turned back to Grandpa. Dad agrees with me, by the way. He and Mom think you should be in a facility. Somewhere with professionals. Not your washout grandson playing nurse. Grandpa's hand shook harder. He dropped his spoon. Clattered loudly. I am not going anywhere, Grandpa whispered. See? Lucas threw his hands up. He's senile. He doesn't know what's good for him. Look at this place. It smells like old soup and failure. I walked over and put a hand on Lucas's shoulder. Get out. You're upsetting him. We can talk about this tomorrow. That was the trigger. Lucas stood up. He didn't just stand. He exploded upward. He grabbed the edge of the table. You don't touch me, he hissed. You don't tell me what to do in my house. It's not your house, I said. Lucas grabbed Leo's plate. It happened in slow motion. I saw his hand clamp around the delicate porcelain. I saw Leo flinch, pulling his small body back. I saw the pot roast and gravy slide as Lucas lifted the plate. It might as well be, Lucas roared. I run this family. I'm the one with the career. I'm the one with the future. You are nothing. He threw it. He didn't just drop it. He threw it at the floor, right between my feet and Leo's chair. Crash. The sound was like a gunshot in the small kitchen. Shards of white porcelain exploded outward. Gravy splattered onto my jeans, onto Leo's socks, onto the legs of Grandpa's wheelchair. Leo let out a small, terrified yelp and covered his ears. Silence followed. Heavy, ringing silence. Then Karen started clapping. A slow, mocking clap. Finally, she said. Someone had to put him in his place. Lucas was breathing hard, his face red, his eyes wild. He looked at the mess on the floor, then at me. A twisted grin spread across his face. Oops, he said. Looks like you have a mess to clean up, Joshua. But you're good at that, aren't you? Cleaning up messes. Wiping asses. It's all you're good for. He pointed a finger at Leo. And teach your brat some manners. He shouldn't be eating with the owners of the estate. Next time he eats on the floor. Like the dog he is. My heart stopped. Then it restarted, beating a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Cold, hard rhythm. I looked at my son. He was crying silently, tears tracking down his cheeks, terrified to make a sound. I looked at Grandpa. His head was bowed, his hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair, so hard his skin looked like paper ready to tear. Then I looked at Lucas. He expected me to yell. He expected me to punch him. He wanted me to lose control so he could call the police, claim I was violent, and have the perfect excuse to kick me out tonight. I saw it in his eyes. He was baiting me. I reached for a napkin. I wiped a spot of gravy from my cheek. I moved slowly, deliberately. Are you done? I asked. My voice didn't shake. It was terrifyingly calm. Lucas blinked. The lack of reaction confused him. Excuse me? Are you done throwing your tantrum? I asked. Or do you need to break a bowl too? You think you're smart? Lucas stepped closer, invading my personal space. You think because you live here rent-free you have rights? I'm the executor, Joshua. Well, I will be. And the second the old man kicks the bucket, hell, maybe before, you're on the street. No inheritance. No trust fund. Nothing. I reached into the inside pocket of my flannel shirt. I felt the cool paper of the envelope I had been carrying for 3 days. I had been waiting for the right time. Grandpa had told me to wait for the right time. Actually, I said, pulling the envelope out, we need to clarify something about the word executor. What is that? Karen asked, stepping closer, her eyes narrowing on the legal seal visible on the document. This, I said, unfolding the document and placing it on the table, right next to Grandpa's trembling hand, is a transfer of deed. What? Lucas scoffed. You printed a certificate off the internet? Did you give yourself a Best Caregiver award? No, I said. I looked him dead in the eye. It's a quitclaim deed. Signed, notarized, and filed with the county clerk last week. On Leo's birthday. The one you forgot. Lucas froze. He looked at the paper. He looked at the signature at the bottom. Grandpa Arthur's signature. Shaky, but unmistakable. And below it, the notary's stamp. Grandpa didn't just update his will, Lucas, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the only sound in the room. He transferred the asset. He gave it away while he was still alive, to make sure there was no confusion in probate court. I leaned in. This isn't your inheritance. It's my house, and you just broke a plate on my floor. To understand why that silence in the kitchen was so heavy, you have to understand the noise of the last 6 months. You have to understand that I didn't come back to this mansion because I wanted to live like a prince. I came back because I had nowhere else to go. 6 months ago, my life was a typical American success story, until it wasn't. I was an architect at a mid-sized firm in Chicago. I had a wife, a mortgage, and a 401k. Then the recession hit the construction industry. The layoffs came in waves. I survived the first 2. I didn't survive the 3rd. The same week I lost my salary, my wife filed for divorce. It wasn't a surprise, we had been cold for a long time. But the timing was brutal. She wanted out, and she didn't want the burden of a child while she found herself in California. I got full custody of Leo, so there I was. No job. A foreclosure notice on my suburban home. A 7-year-old son looking at me for answers I didn't have. That's when Grandpa Arthur called. Well, he didn't call. A neighbor called. She told me Grandpa had fallen and had been lying on the floor for 6 hours because the nurse Lucas hired never showed up. I packed everything I owned into my sedan and drove 4 hours back to the estate. When I arrived, the house was a tomb. It smelled of stale medicine and neglect. Lucas, who lived 20 minutes away in a luxury condo, hadn't visited in 3 weeks. He was too busy closing deals. I remember the first night I walked into Grandpa's room. He was so thin. He looked like a bird that had fallen out of a nest. Joshua, he had whispered. Is that you? I'm here, Grandpa, I said, choking back tears. I'm here. For the next 6 months, I became invisible to the world, but I became everything to Grandpa. I wasn't an architect anymore. I was a nurse, a cook, a cleaner, and a storyteller. I learned the rhythm of his medication. I learned how to lift him without hurting his brittle back. I learned that he hated the news because it made him anxious, but he loved listening to audiobooks about history. And Lucas? Lucas was a ghost. He would call, sure. He would call once a week, usually on speakerphone while he was driving somewhere. How's he doing? Lucas would ask, his voice distracted. Is he, lucid? He's fine, Lucas, I would say. He misses you. You should visit. Yeah. Listen, did you find that folder in his study? The one with the bank account details? I need to verify something for the tax return. That was always the conversation. Taxes, assets, property values. Lucas wasn't asking about his grandfather. He was asking about his portfolio. There was one day about 3 months in that broke me. I was exhausted. Leo was struggling at his new school, getting bullied for his thrift store clothes. I had spent the morning arguing with the insurance company about Grandpa's physical therapy coverage. I went out to the garage to vent. The garage was a detached building, an old carriage house. It was filled with junk, boxes of old magazines, broken furniture, gardening tools. But in the back, under a thick layer of dusty tarps, sat the ghost of the family's past. The 1963 Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was a wreck. The leather was cracked, the paint was dull, and the engine hadn't turned over in a decade. Grandpa loved this car. He used to tell me stories about driving Grandma to the coast in it. I pulled the tarp off. I needed to do something with my hands other than dial phone numbers or mix medicine. I grabbed a rag and some polish I found on a shelf. I started scrubbing the chrome bumper. "What are you doing?" I jumped. Lucas was standing in the doorway of the garage. It was one of his rare visits. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my car. "Cleaning," I said. Lucas walked over, kicking at a tire. "Junk. Total junk. I've already got a guy coming to haul it away next week. Might get a couple grand for scrap." "Scrap?" I stood up. "Lucas, this is a Phantom. It's a classic. Grandpa loves this car." "Grandpa doesn't know what day it is," Lucas sneered. "And the engine is seized. Restoring it would cost 50 grand. We don't have that. The estate is cash poor, Joshua. Asset rich, cash poor. That's why we need to liquidate." "You can't sell it," I said. "It's not yours." "I have power of attorney," Lucas said, tapping his chest. "Or I will once the lawyers finish the paperwork next month. I'm doing what's necessary. You're just playing with toys." He left. He didn't even go inside to say hello to Grandpa. That night I didn't sleep. I went online. I watched tutorials. I used the last $200 of my savings to buy spark plugs, oil, and a specialized battery. For the next 3 months, every hour Grandpa slept, I was in that garage. It became my therapy. Me and Leo. Leo would hold the flashlight. "Daddy, will it run?" Leo asked one night, his face smudged with grease. "I hope so, buddy," I said. "I hope so." It wasn't just about the car. It was about proving Lucas wrong. It was about proving that things and people weren't just scrap because they were old or broken. But the pressure was mounting. Our parents, Grandpa's daughter and her husband, came to visit for Thanksgiving. It was a disaster. They sat in the living room drinking the wine Lucas brought while I served the turkey. "The place looks tired," my mother said, looking at the peeling wallpaper. "Lucas says the foundation needs work." "It's an old house, Mom," I said. "It has character." "Character doesn't pay the bills," my father grunted. "Lucas says you're turning down job interviews. Is that true, Joshua?" "I can't take a 9 to 5, I said, refilling his glass. "Who would watch Grandpa? The nurses cost $30 an hour. We can't afford 24-hour care." "Lucas says we could afford it if we sold the land," Mom said. "He has a developer interested. They want to build condos. Luxury condos. We could move Dad into a nice facility. One with a view." "He wants to stay home," I said, my voice rising. "He built this house. He was born in this house. He doesn't know what he wants." My father snapped. "Stop being selfish, Joshua. You're holding on to this place because you need a place to crash. You're using your grandfather as a shield for your own failure." That hurt. It hurt because a small, dark part of me wondered if it was true. Was I a leech? Was I just hiding from the world? I looked at Grandpa. He was asleep in his chair by the fire, mouth open slightly. He looked peaceful. "No," I said firmly. "I'm holding onto this place because it's his." But I knew the clock was ticking. Lucas was moving pieces around. I saw legal letters arriving from the city. I heard him on the phone with inspectors. He was building a case for incompetence. He was building a case to have Grandpa declared unfit so he could take full control. And I was the only thing standing in his way. Me, the unemployed architect with a greasy wrench and a 7-year-old boy. I felt the walls closing in. I didn't know that the biggest storm was about to hit, and it would come from inside the house. 3 days before the plate incident, the invasion began. I was in the kitchen making oatmeal for Leo when a moving truck pulled up. Not a small U-Haul, a massive professional moving van. Lucas jumped out of his Range Rover, followed by Karen. "What is this?" I asked, walking out to the porch. "Change of plans," Lucas said, adjusting his cufflinks. "We're moving in." "What?" "My condo," Lucas said, waving a vague hand. "We're remodeling. Extensive work. Going to take months. So we figured why pay for a hotel when we have this massive house sitting here rotting. Plus, It'll be easier for me to oversee the transition of the estate if I'm on site. There's no room, I said. Leo is in the guest room. I'm in the study. Well, you'll have to move, Karen said, walking past me with a box of shoes. We need the master suite. Grandpa is in the master suite, I said, stepping in front of her. Not that one, Lucas said. The East Wing suite. The one you locked up. That was Grandma's room, I said. Grandpa doesn't want anyone in there. Grandpa won't notice, Lucas said. Move your kid. We need the guest room for my office. I have Zoom calls. I can't have a child running around making noise. They didn't ask. They took. By noon, Leo's clothes were in garbage bags. They moved us to the attic. It was a finished attic, technically, but it was freezing in the winter and boiling in the summer. It had one small window and the floorboards creaked. It's an adventure, Leo, I told him, trying to keep my voice light as we carried his Lego sets up the narrow stairs. Like a treehouse. Leo didn't smile. Why does Uncle Lucas hate us? He doesn't hate us, I lied. He's just stressed. But it wasn't stress. It was malice. That night, I went down to get a glass of water. The house felt different. It was filled with boxes of their stuff. Modern art that clashed with the Victorian walls. Espresso machines that looked like spaceships. I heard voices in the living room. Lucas and Karen. They were drinking wine. How long do we have to stay here? Karen whined. Ideally, until the sale closes, Lucas said. I can't go back to the condo, Karen. The bank is going to foreclose next week. I froze in the hallway shadows. Foreclose? Shoo, Karen hissed. Don't say that word. It's the truth, Lucas said, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. The crypto crash wiped me out. The leverage on the business. It's gone. If I don't liquidate this estate in 30 days, I'm done. Bankruptcy. Prison, maybe, if they look too closely at the company accounts. My breath caught in my throat. Lucas wasn't rich. He was broke. He was desperate. He wasn't trying to sell the house for Grandpa's benefit. He was trying to sell it to cover his own massive failures. What about Joshua? Karen asked. He's digging his heels in. Joshua is a loser, Lucas spat. I'll break him. We just make it miserable for him. Cut the Wi-Fi. Complain about the food. Make him feel like the servant he is. He'll leave. He has no spine. And the old man? If he doesn't sign the power of attorney by Friday, Lucas said, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. I'm putting him in the state home. The cheap one. I need the equity, Karen. I need every cent. I backed away silently. My hands were shaking. Not with fear, but with rage. Cold, clarifying rage. He was going to throw our grandfather into a state facility. A place that smelled of urine and despair, just to pay off his gambling debts. I went back up to the attic. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress where Leo was sleeping. I looked at my son's peaceful face. Lucas was right about one thing. He was going to try to break me, but he was wrong about my spine. The next morning, the harassment escalated. Karen complained that Leo's cereal crunched too loudly. Lucas complained that the house was too cold, then yelled at me when I turned up the heat because gas is expensive. They treated me like a butler. Joshua, coffee. Black. Joshua, wash my car. Joshua, get the kid out of the living room. I have a client coming. I took it. I bit my tongue. I kept my head down. Why do you let them talk to you like that? The nurse, Elena, asked me one afternoon. She was a kind woman who came twice a week to check Grandpa's vitals. Because I'm waiting, I said. For what? For them to make a mistake. But the mistake didn't come from them. Came from Grandpa, or so I thought. 2 days before the dinner, Grandpa had a bad day. He was confused. He kept calling me by his brother's name. Lucas saw this and pounced. He recorded Grandpa. He stood there with his iPhone, filming Grandpa struggling to remember the word for spoon. See, Lucas said to me, waving the phone. Documented proof of incapacity. I'm sending this to Judge Harrison tomorrow. Emergency guardianship hearing. It's over, Joshua. Pack your bags. He smirked. Oh, and don't worry about Leo's college fund. I checked the trust. I have discretion over disbursements. I don't think art school or whatever useless thing his father did is a good investment. Maybe trade school. Plumbing pays well. That was the moment. The threat to my son. The threat to his future. I walked out of the room. I went to the garage. I sat in the driver's seat of the Rolls-Royce. It smelled of old leather and oil. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I need help, I whispered to the empty air. And then I saw it. On the passenger seat. Grandpa must have left it there months ago, or maybe he put it there recently. It was a business card. Sterling and Associates. Estate law. On the back, in Grandpa's shaky handwriting, was a note. When the wolves come, call Arthur Sterling. I looked at the house. I saw Lucas's silhouette in the window, pacing, talking on his phone, probably selling pieces of my grandfather's life before he was even cold. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the number. Mr. Sterling, I said when a gruff voice answered. This is Joshua. The wolves are here. The meeting happened at midnight. It had to be secret. Lucas had installed a Ring doorbell camera on the front porch the day he arrived, specifically to monitor who I was bringing in. He was paranoid, but he didn't know about the servant's entrance behind the kitchen pantry, the one that led through the garden path to the back alley. Mr. Sterling was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He was 80 years old, wore a trench coat, and carried a briefcase that looked older than me. He had been Grandpa's lawyer for 40 years. I wheeled Grandpa into the library. We didn't turn on the overhead lights. We used a single desk lamp. Felt like a war council. Grandpa, I whispered. Mr. Sterling is here. Grandpa was slumped in his chair. I was worried. He had been foggy all day. If he wasn't lucid, nothing Mr. Sterling did would matter. Lucas's video of him forgetting the spoon would hold up in court. Arthur, Mr. Sterling said, sitting opposite him. It's time. Grandpa lifted his head. And then, a miracle happened. Or maybe it wasn't a miracle. Maybe it was just the sheer force of will of a man protecting his legacy. The fog cleared. Grandpa's eyes sharpened. He sat up straighter. Hello, old friend, Grandpa said. His voice wasn't raspy. It was clear. Did you bring the papers? I did, Mr. Sterling said. He looked at me. Joshua, sit down. I sat. Mr. Sterling, Lucas is filing for emergency guardianship tomorrow. He has a video. Let him file, Mr. Sterling grunted. It won't be worth the paper it's printed on. He opened the briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of documents. Arthur and I have been talking for months, Joshua, Mr. Sterling said. Since you moved in. You have. I looked at Grandpa. But you've been so sick. I'm sick, son. Not stupid, Grandpa said. A small, mischievous smile played on his lips. I see everything. I see you wiping my chin. I see you fixing the roof in the rain. And I see Lucas. I see him checking my pulse like he's checking a turkey timer. Grandpa knows about Lucas's debts, Mr. Sterling added. We ran a background check on him 3 months ago. He's leveraged to the hilt. If he gets control of this estate, he will liquidate everything within a week. The house, the land, the investments. He'll sell it all to save his own skin. I felt a chill. I was right. So we are going to bypass the will, Mr. Sterling said. A will can be contested. A will takes months to probate. Lucas can drag a will through court for years, draining the estate with legal fees until there's nothing left. So what do we do? I asked. We don't leave it to you when I die, Grandpa said. He reached out and took my hand. His skin was dry and cool. I'm giving it to you now. Mr. Sterling slid the document across the mahogany desk. Quitclaim deed. This transfers the title of the property, the land, and the contents of the house directly to you, Joshua Arthur Miller. Immediately, upon signing. My head was spinning. But the taxes? The complications. Taken care of, Mr. Sterling said. We've set up a trust to handle the tax burden. But the ownership, that's yours. Tomorrow, I will file this with the county clerk. It becomes public record. By the time Lucas files his guardianship motion, he will be filing for guardianship over a man who owns nothing. The asset is gone. It's yours. I looked at the paper. It was heavy. It wasn't just a house. It was a life. It was a responsibility. Why me? I asked, tears stinging my eyes. I'm the failure. I lost my job. I lost my marriage. You didn't lose your integrity, Grandpa said softly. You came back. You stayed. That's not failure, Josh. That's loyalty. And loyalty is the only currency that matters in this house. He pointed to the pen. Sign it. I signed. My hand shook, but the ink was dark and permanent. Now, Grandpa said, leaning back, the energy fading from him slightly. There is one condition. Anything, I said. Don't tell him yet. What? If you tell him now, he'll fight dirty. He'll call the police, he'll claim coercion. We need him to expose himself, Grandpa said. His voice was getting tired, but the steel was still there. Wait until he thinks he's won. Wait until he shows his true face. Wait until he is so cruel, so undeniable, that no judge in the world will side with him. You want me to let him bully us? I want you to give him enough rope to hang himself, Grandpa said. Can you do that? Can you hold your fire until you see the whites of his eyes? I thought about Karen throwing out Leo's drawings. I thought about Lucas looking at my son like he was a stray dog. I can do it, I said. Mr. Sterling packed up the papers. I'll have this stamped and official by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Keep your copy safe. Keep it on your body. He left into the rainy night. For the next 2 days it was torture. I had the power to end it, but I had to wait. I watched Lucas strut around the house like a king. I watched him bring in a contractor to measure the windows for replacement. Something modern. No more of this Gothic trash. I watched him yell at Grandpa for spilling tea. Look at you, Lucas sneered at Grandpa. Disgusting. Can't wait to get you into a place with plastic sheets. I touched the envelope in my pocket. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. Then came Tuesday. The pot roast. The plate. When Lucas threw that plate at my son when he called him a dog. That was the signal. That was the moment the rope ran out. The conspiracy of good was over. The war had begun. We are back in the kitchen. The shards of the Wedgwood plate are still vibrating on the floor. The gravy is seeping into the grout. Actually, I said, the envelope in my hand feeling like a sword. Grandpa transferred the deed to me last week. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was the sound of a vacuum sucking the oxygen out of the room. Lucas stared at the document I had placed on the table. He blinked. Once. Twice. That's a fake, Karen said, her voice shrill. She laughed. A nervous, jagged sound. He printed it off LegalZoom. Look at him, Lucas. He's pathetic. Lucas didn't laugh. He was a businessman. He knew what a notary seal looked like. He knew what a county clerk stamp looked like. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and picked up the paper. He read. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I watched the color drain from his face, starting at his forehead and washing down to his neck until he was the color of old ash. Quitclaim, he whispered. Consideration of $1. He looked up at me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, naked panic. You stole it. You coerced him. He's incompetent. He doesn't know what he signed. Read the date, Lucas, I said, leaning against the counter, crossing my arms. October 12th. So, October 12th was the day you sent Dr. Eris over here to evaluate him. Remember? You wanted proof he was senile so you could rush the guardianship. Lucas swallowed hard. He remembered. And what did Dr. Eris write in his report? I asked. Lucas didn't answer. He wrote that Arthur Miller is physically frail but mentally acute and fully oriented. I quoted. You hid that report because it didn't fit your narrative. But Mr. Sterling has a copy, and he attached it to the filing of this deed. We have a doctor's note from the same day verifying he was of sound mind when he signed this house to me." "No," Lucas whispered. He crushed the paper in his hand. "No, I have buyers. I have a bridge loan secured against this property. The money is already spent." "That sounds like a you problem," I said. "You can't do this." Karen screamed. She lunged forward, grabbing the paper from Lucas. "I'm calling the police. This is fraud. You're manipulating an old man. Call them." A voice rasped. We all turned. Grandpa Arthur was gripping the edge of the table. He was pulling himself up. He hadn't stood up without help in 6 months. His legs were shaking violently, but he was standing. "Grandpa, sit down," I said, rushing forward. "No!" Grandpa roared. It wasn't a whisper anymore. It was the voice of the man who had built a business empire from nothing. "I want to stand. I want to look him in the eye." He looked at Lucas. "You came into my house," Grandpa said, breathless but fierce. "You ignored me for years. You waited for me to die. And when I didn't die fast enough, you tried to bury me." "Dad, I was trying to help," Lucas stammered, stepping back. "You threw a plate at a child," Grandpa shouted, pointing a crooked finger at Leo. "You called my great-grandson a dog. In my kitchen." "Grandpa, please," Lucas said, sweat beading on his forehead. "It was a joke. I was stressed. The market, the crypto." "I don't care about your crypto," Grandpa spat. "I care about family. Joshua is family. You are a vulture." Grandpa slumped back into his chair, exhausted by the effort. I put a hand on his shoulder to steady him. "You heard the owner," I said to Lucas. "Well, the previous owner. The current owner is telling you to leave." "We live here," Karen shrieked. "We have rights. Squatters' rights. You have to give us 30 days' notice." I smiled. It was a cold smile. "Actually, you've been here 6 days. In this state, tenancy isn't established until 30 days. You are guests, and guests can be asked to leave at any time." I checked my watch. It is 6:15 p.m. If you are not off my property by 6:45 p.m., I am calling the sheriff. And since the sheriff is an old fishing buddy of Grandpa's, I don't think he'll be very sympathetic to the man who just assaulted a 7-year-old. "Assault?" Lucas laughed nervously. "I broke a plate. You threw an object with intent to harm in the direction of a minor," I said, using the legal phrasing Mr. Sterling had taught me. "That's assault, or child endangerment. Do you want to find out which charge sticks?" Lucas looked at me. He looked at the wreckage on the floor. He looked at the terrified realization in his wife's eyes. The power dynamic had shifted. The gravity of the room had moved from him to me. "Fine," Lucas spat. "Fine. Keep this rotting heap. See if I care. The roof leaks. The pipes rattle. You'll be bankrupt in a year trying to heat this place." "Maybe," I said, "but I won't be homeless. Unlike you." "Let's go, Karen," Lucas said, turning on his heel. "We're going to a hotel. The Four Seasons." "With what credit card?" Karen hissed at him, her voice low but audible. "You said they were all maxed out." "Shut up." Lucas pushed her toward the door. "Just pack the bags." They scrambled. It wasn't the dignified exit of high society people. It was a frantic, messy retreat. I heard them running upstairs. I heard suitcases being thrown open. I turned to Leo, picked him up and hugged him tight. He buried his face in my neck. "Is he gone, Daddy?" "He's going, buddy. He's going." I looked at Grandpa. He was breathing heavily, but he was smiling. He gave me a thumbs up. But it wasn't over yet. Lucas wasn't the type to leave quietly. He had one more card to play, or so he thought. 30 minutes. That was the deadline. I sat in the hallway in a chair watching the staircase. I held my phone in my hand, the screen glowing with the number for the sheriff's department already dialed, thumb hovering over the call button. Grandpa was resting in the living room with Leo watching cartoons. I needed to be the guard dog. At 6:40 p.m., they came down. They looked ridiculous. Karen was wearing a fur coat over yoga pants, dragging 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases that were clearly overstuffed. Lucas was carrying a box of his office essentials, mostly awards he had bought for himself and a humidor for cigars he couldn't afford. They stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "This isn't over," Lucas said, pointing a finger at me. "I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. We'll sue for undue influence. We'll sue for elder abuse. I'll tie this property up in litigation for so long you'll wish you never signed that paper." "You do that," I said, standing up. "But lawyers cost money, Lucas. Do you have a retainer fee?" Lucas's jaw tightened. He knew I knew. "And another thing," I said, stepping between him and the front door. "Leave the keys." "What?" "The keys to the house. And the garage opener." "I paid for that garage opener," Lucas shouted. "And you installed it on my house. It's a fixture. Leave it." Lucas slammed the remote onto the entry table. "You're petty, Joshua. You've always been petty." "I'm protecting my family," I said. He grabbed his box and stormed out the front door. Karen followed, struggling with the bags. She didn't look at me. She looked defeated. The reality of the Four Seasons lie was probably sinking in. They were likely heading to a Motel 6. I followed them out to the driveway. I wanted to see taillights. I needed to see them leave. Lucas threw his box into the back of his Range Rover. He slammed the trunk. He marched around to the driver's side. He paused. He looked at the garage. The garage door was open. I had left it open earlier when I was grabbing tools. The light was on. And there, gleaming under the single hanging bulb, was the Rolls-Royce. It wasn't the dusty wreck he had seen 3 months ago. The chrome was polished to a mirror shine. The leather had been conditioned. The paint, though still old, had a deep, dignified luster. Lucas stopped. He walked toward the garage, drawn like a moth to a flame. "You," he muttered. "You fixed it." "I did," I said, standing at the edge of the driveway. "That car is worth 80, maybe 100,000 in this condition," Lucas said. His voice changed. The anger was gone, replaced by a hungry, desperate greed. He turned to me. His face softened. He put on that fake smile, the salesman smile. "Josh," he said. "Hey, look, maybe we acted hastily. Did we? I mean, we're brothers," Lucas said, taking a step toward me. "Family fights, right? Is what we do. But we shouldn't let money come between us." "You threw a plate at my son," I reminded him. I know. I was upset. I'll apologize. I'll buy him a new, whatever, a PlayStation." Lucas gestured to the car. "Listen, I have a buyer for this. Collector in Dubai. He offered me $120,000 for it as is, if the engine turns over." "Does it turn over?" "It purrs," I said. "Great. See? This is a win. We sell the car. Split the money. 60 grand each. That helps you fix the roof, helps me with my liquidity issue. We forget about the eviction. I stay in the guest room for a week, just until the deal closes. What do you say?" I looked at him. I really looked at him. He was standing there, desperate, sweating, willing to sell his own dignity for a piece of metal he had called scrap 3 months ago. He didn't care about the car. He didn't care about the house. He just saw a dollar sign. "Get in your car, Lucas," I said. "Come on, Josh. Don't be an idiot. It's free money." "It's not your car," I said. "It's part of the estate. If you own the house, you own the contents. You can sell it." "I can," I said. "But I won't." "Why? Are you stupid?" "Because," I said, leaning in close, savoring the moment, "I gave it to Leo." "What?" "For his birthday. The one you forgot. I put the title in a trust for him. He owns the Rolls-Royce. So unless you want to negotiate a sale with a 7-year-old who is currently crying because you called him a dog, you're out of luck." Lucas's mouth fell open. You gave $100,000 car to a child? I gave a family heirloom to the only person who helped me polish it, I said. Lucas stared at me. He realized then that he couldn't negotiate with me. He couldn't bully me. And he couldn't buy me. You'll regret this, he whispered. When the property taxes come due. When the heating bill comes. You'll come crawling to me. Goodbye, Lucas. He got in his Range Rover. He revved the engine aggressively, peeling out of the driveway, gravel spraying everywhere, the same gravel he had crunched on his way in. Karen stared out the window, her face a mask of misery. I watched the red taillights disappear down the long, tree-lined driveway. Silence returned to the estate. The crickets chirped. The wind rustled the old oak trees. I walked back inside. I locked the heavy front door. Click, click. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I went into the living room. Grandpa was asleep in his chair. Leo was curled up on the rug, coloring. Is he gone? Leo asked, looking up. Yeah, buddy, I said, sitting down on the floor next to him. He's gone. Is this our house now? I looked around at the peeling wallpaper, the drafty windows, the high ceilings that held so many memories. It wasn't perfect. It was old. It was expensive. It was going to be a lot of work. But it was safe. Yes, I said, kissing the top of his head. It's our house. The morning after the eviction, the sun didn't just rise. It felt like it broke through a dam. I woke up on the floor of Leo's room, my back aching from the thin rug, but my chest felt lighter than it had in a decade. The house was silent. Not the heavy, oppressive silence of walking on eggshells around Lucas, but the peaceful, dusty silence of a building that was finally taking a deep breath. But victory, I quickly learned, comes with a utility bill. Owning a historic estate isn't like winning the lottery. It's like inheriting a giant, hungry, beautiful beast. The first month was a brutal wake-up call. The heating oil delivery cost $1,200. The property tax assessment arrived 3 days later, a number so large I had to sit down on the stairs to breathe. Lucas had been right about one thing: we were asset-rich and cash-poor. Daddy, the ceiling is crying, Leo told me one rainy Tuesday. I ran to the library. Sure enough, water was dripping steadily onto the mahogany floor, missing the rare books by inches. I spent the next 4 hours on the roof in a windstorm, nailing down a blue tarp, slipping on wet slate, praying I wouldn't fall and break my neck, because there was no one else to take care of Grandpa. That was the reality. I wasn't a rich heir lounging in a silk robe. I was a janitor with a mortgage. But I loved every second of it, because every nail I drove was mine. Every floorboard I polished was for us. Grandpa thrived. It was amazing to watch. Without the stress of Lucas looming over him, without Karen's judgmental stares, he seemed to age backward. We established a new routine. In the mornings, I would will him into the kitchen, our kitchen, and we would drink coffee while Leo ate his toast. We need to prune the roses, Josh, Grandpa would say, pointing out the window. They're getting unruly. I'm on it, Grandpa. Right after I fix the disposal. Good lad. And check the oil in the Phantom. Machines die if they sit still too long. The Phantom, that car became our symbol. I didn't sell it. Couldn't. Even though selling it would have fixed the roof properly and paid the taxes for 2 years, I couldn't do it. It was Leo's now. Technically, it was in a trust one set up with Mr. Sterling, but in spirit, it was the anchor of our new life. Every Sunday, weather permitting, I would back it out of the garage. I would lift Grandpa into the passenger seat, a 20-minute process that required patience and leverage, and Leo would hop in the back, sinking into the plush leather that smelled of 1963. We would drive into town. We didn't go fast. We rolled down Main Street at 25 miles per hour, the massive engine purring like a lion. People stopped. They stared. Not because of the money, but because of the dignity. They saw Arthur Miller, the man they thought was dying, waving like a king from the window of his own chariot. It was our victory lap. But the war wasn't completely over. The enemy had just retreated to the trenches. 3 weeks after the eviction, the process server arrived. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker who handed me a thick envelope while I was weeding the front garden. "You've been served," he said, chewing gum. I opened it right there in the dirt. Lucas Miller versus Joshua Miller and Arthur Miller. He was suing. Of course he was. The lawsuit was a masterpiece of fiction. It claimed undue influence, elder abuse, fraudulent conveyance, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Lucas was claiming that I had drugged Grandpa, isolated him, and forced him to sign the deed while he was hallucinating. He demanded the return of the property, the car, and $500,000 in punitive damages. My stomach dropped. Not because I was guilty, but because lawyers cost money. Money I didn't have. I called Mr. Sterling. "Let him try," Mr. Sterling growled over the phone. "I've been waiting for this." The deposition was scheduled for a month later. In that month, I learned what had happened to Lucas. And it wasn't pretty. Small towns talk. The gossip traveled from the country club to the grocery store, and eventually to me. Lucas hadn't gone to the Four Seasons. He had gone to a mid-range chain hotel by the highway. Then, when his credit card started declining, they moved to a furnished rental apartment on the bad side of town. His business, a consulting firm that was mostly smoke and mirrors, collapsed. It turned out he had been using client deposits to pay for his Range Rover lease and Karen's designer bags. When the crypto market crashed, he tried to cover the holes with more borrowing, banking on selling the estate to pay it all back. When I kicked him out, the house of cards fell. His investors sued him. The bank repossessed the Range Rover. I actually saw it happen. I was in town buying hardware, and I saw a tow truck hooking up his black SUV in the parking lot of the pharmacy. Lucas was screaming at the driver, waving his arms, looking disheveled and frantic. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing sweatpants. I didn't stop. I didn't honk. I just drove past in my 10-year-old sedan, filled with lumber for the porch. I felt a pang of pity, but then I remembered the plate crashing on the floor. I remembered him calling my son a dog. The pity evaporated. Then came the parents. This was the hardest part. My mother and father, Lucas's biggest cheerleaders, had been suspiciously quiet since the eviction. They hadn't called. They hadn't visited. Then, about 2 months in, just before the lawsuit was set to move forward, they showed up. I was painting the front door. I wanted to change it from the dour black it had been for 50 years to a welcoming deep red. I heard their car, a sensible sedan, pull up. My mother got out. She was holding a Tupperware container. My father followed, looking at his shoes. "Joshua," Mom said, putting on a bright, brittle smile. "We brought lasagna." Lasagna, the universal peace offering of guilt. "Hello, Mom." "Dad," I said, not putting down my paintbrush. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" We wanted to see how you were managing," Dad said, kicking at a loose stone. "Ideally, we should have come sooner. But it's been complicated." "Complicated," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Lucas is in a bad way, Josh," Mom said, her voice trembling. "He's lost everything. Karen left him." I paused. "Karen left? Last week?" Mom sniffed, wiping a tear. "She moved back in with her parents in Connecticut. She said she didn't sign up for poverty. She filed for divorce yesterday. So the rats were fleeing the sinking ship." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I was, not for Lucas, but for the sheer waste of it all. A marriage built on status isn't a marriage. It's a merger, and mergers fail when the stock drops. "He's your brother," Dad said, stepping forward. "He made mistakes. We know that. He was aggressive, but he's family. He's living in a studio apartment, Josh. He's sleeping on a futon." "And?" I asked. "And this house has 8 bedrooms," Mom said. "We were thinking, maybe you could let him come back, just for a while, just until he gets back on his feet. He could help you with the repairs. He promised he'd be different." I looked at them, These were the people who had sat at the Thanksgiving table and told me I was a failure. These were the people who had watched Lucas bully me for years and called it ambition. They didn't want justice. They wanted comfort. They wanted the problem to go away so they could go back to pretending we were a perfect family. "Did he send you?" I asked. They didn't answer. That was answer enough. "He's suing me, Mom," I said calmly. "He's suing Grandpa. He's trying to prove Grandpa is insane. You want me to invite the man who is actively trying to destroy us back into our home. He'll drop the lawsuit," Dad insisted. "If you let him move in, he'll drop it. It's a negotiation." "It's blackmail," I corrected. I put the paintbrush down. I wiped my hands on a rag. "No," I said. "Joshua, please," Mom pleaded. "Be the bigger person." "I am being the bigger person," I said. "I'm being the person who protects his son." Lucas threw a plate at Leo. He traumatized him. Leo still asks me if Uncle Luke is coming back every time he hears a car door slam. My job isn't to save my adult brother from the consequences of his own greed. My job is to make sure my child feels safe in his own home. "You're being cruel," Mom said, her voice hardening. "Just like your grandfather. Stubborn and cruel." "If protecting my family is cruel," I said, picking up the brush again, "then I'm okay with that." "We won't come back," Dad threatened. "If you turn him away, you turn us away." I looked at the house. I looked at the window where Grandpa was reading a book to Leo. I could see their silhouettes. "I understand," I said. "Goodbye." They left the lasagna on the porch railing. I watched them drive away. I felt a crack in my heart. They were my parents, after all. But underneath the pain was a solid foundation of self-respect. I didn't eat the lasagna. I gave it to the dog we adopted the next week. A rescue golden retriever named Buster. Because every boy needs a dog, and every estate needs a guardian. The lawsuit died a quiet, humiliating death 3 weeks later. We met for a deposition at Mr. Sterling's office. Lucas walked in. He looked 10 years older. His hair was thinning, his suit was wrinkled, and he had the desperate, shifty eyes of a man who hadn't slept in days. He sat across from me. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mr. Sterling didn't waste time. He placed a laptop on the table. "Mr. Miller," Sterling said to Lucas, "before we begin, I want to play a video for you." "I've seen the video of the plate," Lucas's lawyer, a cheap strip mall attorney, sneered. "It proves nothing but a heated family argument." "Not that video," Sterling said. He pressed play. It was footage from the doorbell camera Lucas had installed. But it wasn't from the night of the eviction. It was from 2 months prior. The video showed Lucas standing on the porch, talking on his cell phone. He clearly didn't know the audio was recording. "Yeah, the old man is totally gone," Lucas's voice said clearly on the recording. "He doesn't know what day it is. But I need to get him to sign the power of attorney before he croaks. I'm going to cut the heat in his room tonight. Make him uncomfortable. Make him pliable. If he gets pneumonia, well, nature takes its course, right? Faster payout." The silence in the conference room was absolute. Lucas's lawyer turned pale. He looked at Lucas. "You said there was no evidence of malice." I was joking," Lucas stammered. "It was dark humor. It's premeditated elder abuse," Mr. Sterling said, closing the laptop. "And attempted manslaughter. Now here is my offer. You drop the lawsuit. You sign a document relinquishing all future claims to the estate. And you stay at least 500 yards away from Joshua, Leo, and Arthur Miller for the rest of your life." "And if I don't?" Lucas whispered. "Then I take this video to the district attorney," Sterling said. "And you won't be looking for an apartment. You'll be looking at 5 to 10 years. Lucas signed. His hand shook so hard he tore the paper. He didn't look at me when he left. He just walked out, a small, broken man carrying the weight of his own sins. I walked out of that office into the bright sunlight. I called Grandpa. "It's done," I said. "He's gone. He's gone, Grandpa. For good." "Good," Grandpa said. "Now come home." The roses need watering. That evening, I sat on the porch. The fresh red paint was dry. The sun was setting over the trees, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. Leo was throwing a tennis ball for Buster. Grandpa was sitting in his wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, watching them with a smile that lit up his face. The roof still leaked a little in the guest room. The boiler was making a funny noise. My bank account had exactly $400 in it. But I was the richest man in the world. A few days later, a letter arrived. No return address. The handwriting was jagged and feminine. Karen. I stood by the fireplace in the living room, the one we had finally cleaned the soot out of, and opened it. Joshua. It read. I want you to know this was all Lucas. He made me act that way. He told me we were owed that house. I never hated Leo. I was stressed. Please, if there is any money in the trust for family, consider helping me. I am living in my childhood bedroom. I am a victim here too. I read it twice. I thought about her clapping when the plate broke. I thought about her calling my son a dog. I thought about her complaining that the good china was wasted on him. She wasn't a victim. She was an accomplice who regretted getting caught. I didn't write back. I didn't send money. I tossed the letter into the fire. I watched the flames curl the edges of the paper. I watched the words, I am a victim, turn into black ash and float up the chimney, disappearing into the night. Daddy! Leo yelled from the kitchen. Buster knocked over the water bowl. I'm coming! I yelled back. I grabbed a towel. I walked into the kitchen. There was water everywhere. Buster was wagging his tail, looking guilty. Leo was giggling. It's a mess, Leo said. It is, I agreed, getting down on my knees to wipe it up. Are you mad? No, I said. I'm not mad. Messes happen. We just clean them up. And that was the truth. We had spent 6 months cleaning up the biggest mess of our lives. Now, a little spilled water was nothing. 3 months later, summer arrived. The estate looked different now. The grass wasn't perfectly manicured like a golf course, but it was green and alive. There were tricycles on the porch. There were tomato plants growing in pots by the back door. My attempt at a vegetable garden to save on grocery bills. I was sitting in the driver's seat of the Rolls-Royce, parked in the driveway. I wasn't going anywhere. I was just sitting there, letting the engine idle, listening to the deep, rhythmic heartbeat of the machine. Grandpa had passed away the week before. It wasn't tragic. It was peaceful. He went to sleep in his favorite chair, listening to an audiobook about the Roman Empire, and he just didn't wake up. We buried him next to Grandma in the family plot on the edge of the property. It was a small funeral. No fake tears. No politicians or business partners looking for networking opportunities. Just me, Leo, Mr. Sterling, Elena the nurse, and a few neighbors who actually knew his name. Lucas didn't come. My parents sent flowers, but they didn't show up. They claimed travel issues, but I knew they just couldn't face me, or maybe they couldn't face the truth of what they had abandoned. I ran my hand over the steering wheel of the Phantom. Mr. Sterling had read the final will yesterday. It was short. To my grandson, Lucas, I leave my forgiveness, because he will need it more than money. To my daughter and her husband, I leave my memories, as they chose not to make new ones. To Joshua, I leave everything else, because he was the only one who understood that everything is just a word for home. And there was a separate envelope for Leo. Inside was the title to the Rolls-Royce, fully transferred into a trust for his education. I looked out the windshield. Leo was running across the lawn with Buster. He was wearing dirty sneakers and a t-shirt stained with watermelon juice. He looked happy. He looked safe. I thought about the man I was a year ago, the architect who defined himself by his salary, his job title, his zip code, the man who felt like his life was over when he got laid off. I realized now how small that man was. I had spent my whole life thinking that inheritance was something you waited for, something you were given because of your DNA. I thought wealth was a number in a bank account. I was wrong. Inheritance isn't what you get. It's what you preserve. It's the stories you keep alive. It's the dignity you maintain when people are throwing plates at your feet. It's the safety you build for the people who can't build it themselves. Lucas wanted the house because of what it was worth. I got the house because of what I was willing to give for it. He thought he was the main character of this story because he was the golden child. But reality doesn't care about your labels. Reality cares about who shows up at 3 a.m. to change the sheets. Reality cares about who holds the hand that is shaking. I turned off the engine. The silence returned, peaceful and warm. I got out of the car. "Daddy!" Leo shouted. "Look, I found a frog." "Coming, buddy." I walked across the grass toward my son. I didn't walk like a beaten-down single dad anymore. I walked like the owner of the estate, not because I had a piece of paper that said so, but because I had earned the right to stand on this ground. Lucas was out there somewhere, chasing the next deal, the next scam, the next illusion of happiness. I hoped he found it. I really did. But me, I had already found it. It was right here, in the muddy knees of my 7-year-old son, in the wagging tail of a rescue dog, and in the quiet, sturdy walls of a house that finally knew what love felt like. My brother threw a plate on the floor to make me feel small. He didn't know that by bending down to clean it up, I was planting my feet. And once I planted them, I wasn't moving for anyone. This story is about more than just a family feud or a legal battle over a mansion. At its core, it is a lesson about the true definition of dignity and duty. We live in a world that often confuses net worth with self-worth. Lucas believed that his expensive suits and job title gave him the right to treat others as inferior. He forgot that respect is earned through action, not demanded through status. Joshua, on the other hand, showed us that true strength is often quiet. It's the strength to care for the vulnerable, Grandpa Arthur, even when it's unglamorous. It's the strength to keep your cool when you are being insulted. The most important lesson here is that you teach people how to treat you, by standing up to his brother, not with violence, but with facts, preparation, and self-respect. Joshua broke the cycle of abuse. He protected his son not just from physical harm, but from the emotional damage of seeing his father humiliated. I would love to hear your thoughts. What is your definition of family? Is it the blood that runs in your veins? Or is it the people who show up when things get tough? If you enjoyed Joshua's journey from underdog to protector, please leave a comment with the word good below. Or, tell me about a time you had to stand up for yourself against a family member who crossed the line. Your stories help us all feel a little less alone. Thank you for listening, and remember, the most valuable inheritance you can leave is your character.